Over to you, sir.
Rajesh sir, please unmute yourself.
So, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vedansh, for introducing me. And I'm calling from my tablet, so I'm not in a position to see all of you, but I think there are about 81 participants. So, you're all welcome. So, while introducing, Vedansh told everything about me, about my engagement with the central government, being the central government standing council and being the member of the executive council of University of Delhi. But my main and principal introduction is that I'm a human rights activist and I'm associated with the human rights movement from the last more than 20 years now. And I'm also the Secretary General of Human Rights Defense International, and we are dealing with various human rights issues. So my that is my principal introduction. So kindly take that introduction in your mind and carry with you. And what our prime concern is in our organization, Human Rights Defense International, that all the students of law or all the activists who are interested in study of human rights should ultimately be converted into human rights activists. So these certificate course which are there by Think India in association with HRDI, our ultimate aim and our ultimate goal is that whosoever is attending these courses should not only be having some knowledge about the international convention and human rights laws of India, but the process of their becoming the human rights activists should start with these kind of interactions with us. So this is the background, and this is something which I wanted to discuss you and which I wanted to tell you as to what Human Rights Defense International is expecting from you. So today, my subject is little very vast because it has so many ramifications involved in it. But I'm to speak on this international law and Indian norms. So it is little very vast. So I will try to go as slow as possible and cover as much as I can. So as far as the human rights are concerned, um, I don't want to tell you anything about the definition of human rights because right from the class 8, you are knowing that what is human right. It is being asked in all the classes, all examinations. So you all know what is human rights. So I'm not just wasting any time of yours on explaining you what does human right means. But what I want to know from you and what I want to discuss with you that what is that which is called as the principle of universality of human rights. So what is this expression, principle of universality of human rights? So you are free to chat and you may send your understanding about this concept of universality of human rights in the chat section. So I will read through it. I am not saying anything about it. You just apply your mind and start sharing with us, sharing with the group. And mm, and second question which I wanted to ask you that how these universal human rights are expressed and guaranteed by laws. So my second query to all of you is how these universal human rights are often expressed and guaranteed by law. What are the forms by which these human rights are often expressed and guaranteed by laws? So if I'm able to uh, convey what I'm expecting from all the participants. First was the principle of universality. Second was that how these universal human rights are expressed and guaranteed by law, and what are the forms of the human rights, universal human rights. So if some answers are coming, I will just have a look, then proceed further. And then my third query from the group is that what are the obligations which are laid down by international human rights, which the states which sign and ratify the International Human Rights Convention and treaties are bound to respect? So my third query is that what are the obligations to which the states are bound to respect while they are entering into any treaty or while they are entering into or signing any covenant or convention of human rights. So this is my fourth query, and I'm not just conveying it to you because I'm asking you what is your understanding about them. And to save the time, because we are already it's 4:27, I'm to attend another meeting at 5 o'clock, so I don't want to waste the time. So you can just find out from Google, from your books, and from your other source of knowledge, and answer these queries. What are the obligations of the states? And my other query is, I would have spoken about it, but I'm just shortening my speech. Uh, mm, 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 mm. If any state signs any international treaty or convention, then what do they do for the implementation of those international treaties and convention? What kind of the steps they take for the purpose of implementing those international treaties and conventions? I'm audible. Can you hear my queries?
Sir, you're audible. You're audible, sir.
Okay, fine. And my next query is that how these international human rights instruments and treaties can be classified. So I will start from this step only because we are trying to save some time. So for you are all aware of it that international human rights instruments are of two kinds. One are the declarations, international human rights declarations, and other are the international human rights treaties. So there are two kind of instruments of international human rights. And as far as the declarations are concerned, those declarations are not legally binding, though they can over time obtain the status of customary international law. It carries only moral weight because they have been adopted by a international community. So these are the international declarations. So they are not binding. And others are the international treaties. So international agreements which are concluded between the state in a written form and governed by the international law, which came into force, ratifications by a certain number of states used simultaneously with covenant and conventions. So declaration and treaties, there are two expressions which combined together are the international human rights instruments. And it begins with the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on 10th December 1948. I don't want to go into the detail of the International Convention of Human Rights as to on which date it was adopted, what were the basic essentials of International Convention for Human Rights. But I want to focus on two basic things that are, there are two important conventions. That is, first convention is the Civil International Covenant on Civil and Political Right, and its two optional protocols, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and both together they form the International Bill for Human Rights. So I repeat that Universal Declaration of Human Rights together with International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it is a very, very important covenant, because in Indian judgments of Supreme Court or all around the world, whenever the violation of human rights are taking place, everyone resort to and quotes this International Convention of Civil and Political Right. Very, very important convention. All of you should go through this convention, memorize it, and live this convention, because if you know about this convention, then the beginning of your conversion to a human rights activist is there. Kindly go through this convention. And second convention is International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Right, and together they form the International Bill for Human Rights. So now we proceed further and we discuss about what are the core international human rights treaties, because there are many treaties, but there are 9 core international human rights treaties which address a wide range of economic, social and cultural rights, civil and political rights, and elimination of the racial and gender discrimination. And all these treaties also are concerned about the protection against torture and forced disappearance and the rights of the women, children, migrant persons with disability. This expression, migrant workers. So I will come back to it because there is an international convention on migrant workers, and this country today, India, is facing the crisis of the migrant workers, and our organization, Human Rights Defense International, is concerned about it. So I will come back to this international convention on migrant workers. I will request you that before I come to this convention at the end of this uh, discussion, in the meantime, kindly use your mobile phones, go to the Google and find out about the International Convention on Migrant Workers. We will come back to it. So the nine the core treaties about the human rights. The first treaty is International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. I repeat, International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. In short, it is called ICERD. ICERD. This treaty was adopted on 21st December 1965. So it is the first treaty amongst the core treaties. So I go to this treaty and then we discuss that what are the basic. Just wait for a moment. Okay. So this treaty, which was uh, I repeat the name, International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Uh, just wait for just wait. So this International Covenant on Elimination of All Form of Racial Discrimination was adopted in the United Nations General Assembly through resolution number 2106. So whenever you're talking about any international convention or a treaty, always keep in mind the resolution number because it is adopted by the resolution. This resolution number is 2106 within of 21st December 1965 and is aimed of promoting racial equality. And this treaty was put into force on 4th of January 1969. It was signed by 86 countries and about 170 countries are the parties to this. And there is a treaty body which is called the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And as far as India is concerned, it has ratified this treaty on 3rd December 1968. Now, as far as this treaty is concerned, it is defining racial discrimination. And Article 1 of this treaty defines racial discrimination as any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on race, color, or national or ethnic origin, which has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise, or an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, social, cultural, or any field of public life. And so this convention, I'm not getting into the details of the what are the key rights of enjoyment of which the racial discrimination is prohibited by ICERD. But for your ready reference, it is right to equal treatment before organs administering law, justice, right of security of persons and protection of state against violence, bodily harm, political rights, other civil rights, including the right to freedom of movement, residence and nationality, right to choice of spouse, right to own property and inherit, right to freedom of thought, uh, conscience, religion, opinion and expression, right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association, And there are economic rights such as right to work, right to form and join trade union, right of housing, public health, and so many rights. So it is the first core treaty. Then we come to our second core treaty, that is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It was adopted on 6 December 1966. And and about 72 countries have already signed it, and India has acceded to the this treaty ICCPR on 10th April 1979. And as far as the key civil and political rights which have been recognized by this convention is concerned, they are right to life, protection against arbitrary detention, arrest, slavery, torture, and inhuman treatment, equality before law and non-discriminatory protection of law, freedom of thought, religion, movement, and association, right to participate in the political process, and above all, minority rights. And then there are so many other details as which are about right of physical integrity, liberty, and security of the person. So I'm not getting into the detail. And as far as India declaration is concerned, with some reservations, India has signed this treaty, which we can discuss later on. And then we go to our third core treaty, that is International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, ICESCR. I repeat, International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. It was adopted on 16 December 1966. ICESCR, adopted on 6 December 1966. And 69. So, and as far as the key social and cultural and economic rights recognized by this convention is concerned, they are right of non-discrimination, and second is right to just and favorable condition of work, right to food, trade union rights, right to social security, right to housing and adequate standard of living. So when we are coming to this migrant workers, as far as this convention is concerned, the right of housing and adequate standard of living. So if there was proper housing and adequate standard of living were provided to these migrant workers, this crisis would not have taken place. Right to health. It is the obligation of the state that every citizen should have a good health system. Right to education, right to participate in cultural rights. So I'm not getting into the details of this treaty. We can do it later on. And while this certificate course is going on, I will request the organizers that they should request you to write a paper on all these core treaties. The fourth treaty is the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, optional protocol and treaty body. And as far as this treaty is concerned, it was adopted by United Nations on 3rd of September 1981, and India ratified this convention on 9th July 1993. And as far as the CEDAW is concerned, it defines discrimination against the woman as under any distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex, which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on a basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. And we are aware of the fact that because of this treaty, in the case of Vishakha, the Honorable Supreme Court had paved the way for this various acts and legislation for the benefit of women in India. Then we go to another treaty, which is Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, CAT, Optional Protocol and Treaty. Uh, so, this is CAT, Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment and Punishments. And this convention was adopted by United Nations by resolution number 39 oblique 46 of 10th December 1984. And mm, it is 78 states are signatory to this treaty. And India signed the CAT on 14th October 1997. And it is yet to ratify this convention. And as this convention is dealing with the torture, so torture is a very um, difficult expression to understand. But as per Article 1.1 of the convention against torture, defines torture as any act by which severe pain or suffering, which physical and mental or intentionally inflicted on a person for such purpose as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession, punishing him for an act he or third person has committed or is suspected of having committed, or intimidating or coercing him or a third person or any reason based on discrimination of any kind, when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with consent or acquiescence of public official or other person acting in an official capacity. It does not include pain or suffering arising only from inherent or incidental to lawful sanctions. So, if we just have the understanding of this definition, then how often these tortures are inflicted by on the ordinary citizens of this country? Because every second day you can see it on the roads, how these poor people, unorganized workers are inflicted with this kind of tortures by the state authorities. Then we go to another convention, that is Convention on Rights of Child, CRC. This Convention on Rights of Child uh, is a human right treaty setting out the civil, political, economic, social, health, and cultural rights of children. This convention generally defines a child as any human being under the age of 18, unless an earlier age of majority is recognized by the country's law. Now, this convention was adopted by the resolution number 44 on 20th November 1989, and it is signed by 140 countries, and India has acceded to this CRC on 11th December 1992. And the guiding principle of this treaty or convention is non-discrimination, best interest of child, right of life, survival and development, and respect for the views of child. So it is very important, respect for the views of child. So we go to the another international court treaty, that is International Convention on Protection of Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Family. A very important treaty. I repeat its name, International Convention on the Protection of Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Family. They are dealing with trans-border migrant workers. But the provisions are so important that they should be implemented in India also. So I will just tell you something more about this convention. So this United Nations Convention on Protection of Rights of All Migrant Workers is the only UN convention, United Nations Convention, devoted especially to safeguarding the fundamental rights and undocumented migrants. Undocumented, because whenever you have a documentation, then you have a protection of law. If you are going to a Gulf country and you have all the documentation, then you have the protection of law. Some protection of law. But when you don't have any documentation, then your exploitation is on the hard side. You should also go through the International Labor Organization Convention on Forced Labor. If you go through that convention and see the documentary of International Labor Organization, you will have an understanding that what kind of problems these migrant workers and the forced laborers are facing, because of the states are not very concerned about them. This treaty was adopted by United Nations on 18 December 1919, and it has been signed by 33 countries, and India has not signed this convention till now. So, but we will come back to this convention. Then we have another covenant, which is Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability 2006. So now we have a law. Then I will tell you something more about this convention. So this United Nations Convention was adopted by United Nations General Assembly on 13 December 2006. And the purpose of the convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. And the it defines discrimination on the basis of disability in Article 2, which says that any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of disability which has the purpose or effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal basis with others of all human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, and cultural, civil, or any other field. It includes all forms of discrimination, including denial of reasonable accommodation. So just think about these disabled persons. Their number is enormous in India. They may be in millions, but if you go to a public office, a government office, or in hospital, then how many disabled persons you see under the employment of that particular establishment? So as far as employment is concerned, the disabled person, the blinds, and other disabled persons, they are discriminated. And despite that, they now have a reservation in all government employment. They're facing a lot of discrimination. So it is also a very important convention. And then we come to seventh convention, which is the International Convention for Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. A very important convention, and in India also there is there are serious complaints that people disappear, and this forced disappearance is a very serious problem in India also. So this enforced disappearance, or the arrest, detention, or abduction of a person by the state or agents acting on its behalf, who subsequently deny that the person is being held or conceal their whereabouts, placing them outside the protection of law, has been carried out by all regimes all over the world from Second World War until today. And we know it very well that even around us, you will see that a police wala came and took someone, then he was kept in a police station for 2 3 days, then suddenly that person disappears. And police wala says, okay, he has run away from the custody, and after some days his body is found. So this kind of enforced disappearance is a very serious problem all around the world, and it is also a serious problem in India also. And India has signed this covenant on 6 December 2007, and it defines enforced appearance as uh, that arrest, detention, abduction, or any form of deprivation of uh, liberty by agents of state or by persons or groups of persons acting with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or by concealment of their fate or whereabouts of the disappeared persons, which place such a person outside the protection of law. And then which human rights does an enforced disappearance violate? So it violates the human rights of right to security and dignity of person, right not to be subjected to torture or any other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, right to humane conditions of detention, right to legal personality, right to fair trial, right to family life. If the disabled person is killed, the right to life. So all these important human rights are violated whenever enforced disappearance is there. Think about the family of the person who is enforced, who disappears. So the whole family is just waiting for it. They know, and we know about in Kashmir that how widows, half widows, as the concept is very common there. So this is also a very important convention. You should know more about it. Then, apart from these core international conventions, we have core international labor organization conventions, and those conventions are also equally important. I will come to the first convention, which is called as Forced Labor Convention 1930. In 1930, International Labour Organization had this convention, and we have reference to this forced labor in our constitution also. Uh, Sorry, lost this track. Okay, so now we are there is 190. So Convention on Forced Labor 1930, and this convention has estimated that there are about 12 million people working under condition of forced labor. 12 million people, and worldwide, children are believed to make up between 40 to 50% of the forced labor. And this convention was adopted as ILO Convention number 29 in the year 1930, and it was entry into force was from 1st May 1932, and 175 countries have already signed it. India has ratified this convention on 30th November 1954. So you may just have a look on constitution and you will find a reference of this forced labor. So you can, uh, in this chatting, you can mention that which article talks about the forced labor in India. And in the Forced Labor Convention 1930, it defines forced or compulsory labor as all work or service which is exacted from any person under the menace of any penalty or for which the said person has not offered himself voluntarily. And it is happening right in Delhi that the workers are working in industrial establishment for 5,000, 6,000 rupees for a month. So they were not voluntarily opting for this kind of working conditions. And but forced labor is a serious problem in India also, and state of India is just ignoring it continuously. Then we have this ILO Convention on Freedom of Association and Protection of Right to Organize, 1948 convention. And as the most fundamental rights of the workers include right to form and join organization of their own choosing and to promote and defend their economic and social interests. These conventions give the same rights to employers. Convention 87 gives workers the right to form and join trade unions. Freedom of association is considered the most fundamental of labor standards within International Labour Organization. So, and the key provision of this convention is right of workers and employers to establish or join organizations, and right and guarantee of organization, freedom of action, protection from dissolution, right to establish and join federations, acquisition of legal personality, right to strike. It is also a right to strike. International recognized right to strike is there. So now we go back to another ILO convention is right to organize and collective bargaining. So collective bargain is the soul of trade union movement, and because workers are, uh, if they are not together, if they are not in form of a union, so they are not in a position to bargain. So collective bargain is a very important right, and the freedom of association and effective recognition of this right to collective bargaining are the foundation for a process in which the workers and employers make claim upon each other and resolve them through a process of negotiation leading to collective agreement that are mutually beneficial. In the process, different interests are reconciled. This convention was adopted by ILO in the year 1949, and it came into force from 18th July 1951. It has been signed by 160 countries. Unfortunately, India has not ratified this convention. And I'm not getting into the details of this convention, but kindly go through this convention, convention number 98, and and if possible, I will request the organizers, you should prepare a note or paper on the um, protection of workers as far as this particular convention is concerned. It's a very, very progressive convention, and it has a reflection on our Industrial Disputes Act, Equal Remuneration Act, Trade Union Act. So as many as 7 to 8 labor legislation are get their inspiration from this convention, right to organize and collective bargain. It's a very important convention. Kindly go through this convention. Then equal remuneration. It's a convention of 1951. Uh, so the Convention on Equal Remuneration or Convention concerning equal remuneration for men and women workers for work of equal value was adopted on 29th June 1951 by the General Conference of International Labour Organization, and India has ratified this convention on 25th September 1958, and 168 countries have parties to this convention. And I'm not getting into the definition of remuneration and equal remuneration of this convention. Kindly go through this convention. It is very important. And on the basis of this convention, we have a very important law, Equal Remuneration Act. So go through this convention and also go through the content of this Equal Remuneration Act. You will see that it is just following this convention. So it has that impact. and why so many people are getting equal remuneration. Even in the government employment, you will find numerous cases on equal remuneration. It is right of equality also. So kindly have a look on this convention and the provision of the Equal Remuneration Act. Uh, then we have four another conventions of ILO, that is the abolition of forced labor 1957, discrimination, employment and occupation 1958, minimum age convention 1973, elimination of worst form of child labor 1999. Um, I'm running little short of time, so I'm not getting into the details of
Sir,
these conventions.
if you
Kindly
allow
go
us
through
to
this
take,
convention. I will request the organizer to request you to write paper on each and every convention. And unfortunately, some of the most important conventions have not been signed by the government of India. And you should also have something to say about this response of the government of India about these important conventions. And then I will just have a running reference to the constitutional provisions on human rights and implementation of international laws. And so, as far as Indian Constitution is concerned, then we have these fundamental rights, which is basically recognition and protection of human rights only. Then directive principle of state policies, where aim to establish political, economic, and social democracy and justice in country. And then we have international treaties and constitutional provisions. Article 51C of the Constitution, which deals with the promotion of the international peace and security. And then 51 further says the state should endeavor to foster respect for international law and treaty obligations in the dealing of organized people with one another. Then Article 73 of the Constitution is about the extent of executive powers of union. Then 73 says that uh, subject to the provision of this constitution, the executive powers of the union shall extend to the matters with respect to which the parliament has power to make laws, and to the exercise of such rights, authority, and jurisdiction as are exercisable by government of India by virtue of any treaty or agreement. So it is also 73 recognizes. Kindly go through Article 253, that is the legislation for giving effect for international agreements. It is a very important article of the Constitution of India. Also have a look on Article 260, that is the jurisdiction of the Union in relation to the territories outside India. We have so many matters on this article also. And then we have a very important matter in the case of Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan. And kindly go through this judgment. It the interplay between the international conventions and adoptions of international conventions and respect for the treaties, that has been elaborately discussed in this matter. Kindly go through this judgment also. It will help you a lot. Vedanshi, I have a request to make.
sir, I just had
Hello,
a request that, hello,
Vedansh,
I'm
can you hear
audible?
me?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Hello.
Hello,
Sir, you're audible. Hello.
Vedanshi, can you hear me?
Hello, sir. Hello.
I'm sorry to all the participants because we have meeting of our organization, Human Rights Defense International, at 5 o'clock. So it was a presentation of 1 hour. It could not be started at 4 o'clock.
Hello.
So I want to leave, but I may rejoin you again whenever the organizers deem it necessary or appropriate. Vedansh, can you hear me?
Hello. Sir, I'm
Hello?
audible. Hello. Shikhar, please continue the session. Hello.
Yes, Vedanshi, you're audible.
Sir, hello.
Vedansh, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible. Okay, sir. On behalf of Think India, I thank you. And if
Hello?
Aniket, please continue the session. I think sir is not.
Yes. On behalf of Think India, we would like to thank Rajesh Gogna sir for sparing his time with us and enlightening us on such an important topic. We are again really sorry. I think we are having parallel meetings in Google Meet also in another session. So there also the same problem is taking place. So I think Google Meet itself is facing lots of issues today. The platform itself is facing a lot of issues today. So from tomorrow onwards, we would like to we will make the changes and we will let you know. And please, one more thing that as told earlier, please join the session 15 minutes prior, as it is already said in the mail, so that whatever problem we have, we can
It
rectify it that time.
ask whether sir has time to take two questions. I
Yes.
think meeting has is scheduled on 5:15. If he allows to continue with the two question.
Okay. Okay. Rajesh sir, can you take two questions,
I
please?
can't hear you, so will you please
Rajesh.
permit me to leave the meeting and join our HRDI meeting? I can't hear you at all.
Okay. Please allow
Okay.
me.
Okay. Okay.
Hitesh, can you call me on my mobile or other tablet number and tell me that, uh, or send me some message in this through text which I can read?